Hello, the day has finally arrived. Intro to AutoCAD. So you fought the good fight. You were able to get the software downloaded, and now we're going to hop in and start learning this stuff. Okay, so what we're going to go through in this PowerPoint, walk through all the buttons in the ribbon and how that works, as well as typing commands into the command line, or at least watching those commands appear as you click on the buttons. We'll learn how to zoom and pan and rotate objects. We'll start in 2D and then go to 3D, but there's going to be a lot of good tools over here in the Nav Bar that you'll want to know how to use. At the very bottom of the screen, there's buttons on the top and buttons on the bottom. On the bottom, this is going to control your snap settings, and the three little lines over here actually will let you customize the ribbon. In fact, you can customize the top and the bottom by clicking on things and moving things around. So we'll go through how to customize your work area, make the buttons large or small, move panels of tools around, and just some of the basics of walking around all of this stuff in AutoCAD.
When you first open AutoCAD up, you'll notice a few differences in the opening 2022 screen. Changed around a little bit from the last version. A couple of different ways to open a new file. So you can go to New over here. You can grab a recent file over here. If you don't like tiles, you can change the format of this around from tiles to a list. I prefer coming all the way up to the red A up in the corner and using this to open a new file and open, as this little guy gives you a couple additional options when it comes to templates. So there are templates and there are also DWG files. What a template is it has units, line types, tools in your ribbon, all of your settings for your dimension styles, and you can, rather than redoing all of those settings every time you open up a document, you can create your own template, or you can use one of the templates that AutoCAD already has for you. Now, these are buried, and it will be very difficult to navigate to these in your computer. You can see that that file path is quite buried underneath where AutoCAD is. But when you're first getting started, there's some nice tutorials in here, as well as basic template setup. So the ACAD is for inches. So when you enter a number, 1, 5, 10, it's going to interpret that number as being 1 inch long. Or if you're working in metric units, then you could open up the ACAD ISO, which allows you, when you type in a number, 510, so that's going to be in centimeters, millimeters, meters. I'll show you how to check what unit you have when you first open up a document. So we'll go ahead and start up an ACAD file for our first exploring tools in here. And as you do that, a new file tab is going to open up here. You can always go back to the Start tab and between your drawing tabs, and if you hit a plus sign, you'll open additional files that will have the same template as what you had been working on. So unless you come up here and click on New, it will just open up the same units, the same settings as what you had before. Okay, let me go back to the Start tab and just explore a few other resources in here. So Autodesk does have quite a few learning resources, tutorials. There's videos for how they've updated it for the new version. So you can kind of scroll through these videos, see if anything looks interesting there. I really like the Hitchhiker's Guide to AutoCAD. So it takes you through the basics from opening files and how the tools are set up to the basic 2D drawing commands and modify commands, and from then on. And it has two different ways. So let me just open up this website and show you how this website is set up. It has both screenshots. So if I click on basics, You can scroll through. I know videos are sometimes very helpful, but if you find yourself pausing, rewinding, pause, rewind, it might be easier to get through it by looking at screenshots. And this is, of course, up to date for the new version of AutoCAD. So it takes you through all of the tools at the top of the screen, how to save your files. And you don't have to save it to AutoCAD's platform. So you can save this as just like you'd save a Word document or Excel or anything else that you save on your computer. So you can put it in your OneDrive cloud account or save it to your computer. And there's several different ways to save. So let me come over here to this open drawing. And you are going to want to remember to hit that save key. There's a couple of auto saves that sometimes work, but just to be safe, get in the habit of coming up there and saving. So you have drawings. That is where just the typical 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional objects that you will save as a drawing. If you want to save your template, layers, line types, dimension styles, units, maybe you have your layouts with title blocks. That is a template, and that will just get that background info for all the settings that you like to use. There are several different export options. So maybe you're working with someone that doesn't own AutoCAD, but they can open a PDF. So there's some neat ways that you can export to some other formats there. If you want to 3D print what you have, so come down to print, and you can either send it to a regular piece of paper if you're just getting dimensions on something, or if you want to create an STL file where you're sending it to a 3D printer, this is the tool that would use to create that kind of a file. So a lot of different file types. And again, those are all found right underneath the big red A. Just click on the A, and that's where you can save your files, print your files. You'll create quite a few files by the end of it. A lot of projects, each little piece is its own file. So get in the habit of organizing your folders and save your drawing files with something descriptive that you can easily find that in the future. Let me go back to the learning resources that are here. So the Hitchhiker's Guide and additional resources. When you get to the Hitchhiker's Guide, so if you click right here, Getting Started, Hitchhiker's Guide, start with the basics. It will then go how to view things. It'll be important that you have a mouse with a scroll button rather than a laptop that just has the mouse pad. A scroll button will be so you can zoom in and out. And a lot of these tools you can actually use on internet pages, Word documents, Excel documents, as well as AutoCAD. So these are just kind of some shortcuts that you should be able to use in multiple platforms. So you can zoom in and out by holding down that scroll button and rolling it in and out. It is an infinite drawing space. It's like outer space. So sometimes if you bump your mouse, it might disappear what you were working on. And in that case, type in zoom all, and it will pull what you are working in back to the screen. So you can find previous views and zooms. You can scale it and change windows. All of the commands will have square brackets with a bunch of different options inside those square brackets that you can click on and use. So anyways, this is just a preview of some of the help tools that are in Autodesk's section. And it's a good idea to start with the basics, go to View, Geometry, and then walk through these. If you can get up to layers is a very unique thing in CAD, which is different than Inventor or SolidWorks in how your drawing is organized. So this is very convenient, especially for things like civil engineering applications, architecture. This is a very nice way to organize information. In addition to screenshots, there are also learning videos in here. So again, starting with just how to save documents, open up templates, and then 2D is where you start. And then usually you take that two-dimensional object and you'll extrude it into 3D. So this is the basis of both 2D and 3D objects. So the drawing tools as well as the modify tools. The text and dimensions, there's the model space and there's a layout. So usually you draw things to scale, 1-to-1 scale, and then when you need it to fit onto a piece of paper, that's where you come over here to layout. Right click gets you extra options for all of these things. So you can go to your page setup manager over here and define what kind of printer you have. Is this a huge poster board or is it a regular 8.5 by 11 piece of paper? What kind of print margins do you have? And it will use view-based to create orthographic views for you. And this is where you'll add dimensions. So you'll be able to see the size of the text with respect to how your drawing is scaled on the correct size piece of paper. So this is where you do all of the paper printing versus the model space where you draw on. Okay, so hopefully I'll talk you guys into taking a little bit of time to go through a few of these learning resources. Each of these videos is just a few minutes long, so take the video and then try it out. And there's little videos like this for every tool that is in here. So that's a great place to start for this. Okay, so that was the first little piece, is explore the learning resources. And I think Hitchhiker's Guide, if you find a different resource, then post it in the discussion forum, because I know there's a lot of great open educational resources out there. So share what you find with other people in class. And also making sure you know how to save documents. So hit on the big red A and you can open documents from here, start with a template, and then save as a drawing, and you can print and export here. So DWG, that's the main drawing file type for AutoCAD. BAK is a file it makes as a backup, and you can rename this as a DWG and get your original file back if it crashes. There's DWT, and that is the templates that save all of your layers and line types and dimension styles and all of your title blocks and that kind of thing. So yeah, when you're first getting started, best thing to start with a basic AutoCAD DWT English unit template, or if you would like to go with a metric template, that would be the AutoCAD ISO.DWT. And those can be found by hitting the red A, new, and drawing template. And once that's open, let me show you how you can check your units on here. So once you're up, before you start drawing anything, it's just a good idea to check, okay, if I type a number in, how is it going to interpret that number? Like, what is it? Is it a mile? Is it an inch? So if you just type in units and then you hit enter, so this is a command line down here, it will pull up a new menu. And you can then decide on what those numbers are going to mean. So this is kind of a standard thing to just enter units in inches, the precision for how your dimensions will by default show up, and if you want degrees or radians. So that's a good place to start. And if you can change those there if you would like to. So just type in units and wait for a little bit, and then it will pull up that menu for you so you can make sure you're working in the right unit. To start out, let's go ahead, click on the gear and drafting and annotation, and that will pull up your 2D drawing tools.
Okay, so just coming over here to the drawing area, let's walk through a few things. There's a couple tabs along the bottom. So you have your model space, and your model space, you want to leave it as a model down here as well. This is where you're going to draw stuff in your drawing area. If you want more room, if you want to minimize the size of these buttons, there's these little arrows up here. So you just click on the arrows and that will change your menu. If your buttons are gone, just click these arrows. It'll cycle through 2 or 3 different sizes of buttons. Okay, up here, so you can have multiple files open. Remember, just go back to that start. If you want to open a file, you can just hit the plus sign, and I think it defaults to the same format that you had previously. But to be safe, go all the way back to the starting screen and pull down the right template when you're adding. And it's nice to have multiple files open so that you can copy and paste from one to another. Maybe have a couple different versions of something going on. So tabs on the top for different files, and then tabs on the bottom for model space and paper space. So if I come down here and click on one of the layouts, and again, we can have a bunch of different layouts. This is if we're going to actually print it on a printer, or maybe you have a giant plotter that will have a huge poster. So you can go through, this is where you have your title block and you add dimensions to it. There's this really cool view base command that it will take a 3-dimensional object and give you the orthographic projections of that object. So very convenient. If you right click on any of these tabs, you can come up here to the page setup manager, and that will let you choose your printer. It'll put these little dashed lines for the printable area, so you're sure not to do something your printer can't handle. You can do landscape or letter. You can change the size of your page. So if you have legal or just 8.5 by 11, standard A size, B size, or a huge poster, so you're formatting it. And it used to be for drafting that you'd have to scale your object up or down to fit on a piece of paper. That's no longer true. So now what you're going to do is you're actually going to make it to scale in model space. So if it's a house, you draw it the size of a house. If it's a little watch gear, you draw it the actual size of that little teeny watch gear. And then when you want to print it out, this is where you're actually going to scale it up or down. So your layout is for actual pieces of paper that you'd hand to the machine shop. Okay, back over here to our model space. There is up here in the upper left-hand area, there's 3 different buttons to see. Okay, so there's one that you can add viewports. There's one that kind of does the same thing as your view cube. You can look at the top left. And then there's another one that has different visual styles that you can see things in. So just to walk through what some of those look like. So here's visual style examples. So you can have a wireframe, realistic, X-ray, and just depending on what you're making, one of these. I do like to come back to the 2D wireframe. You can make surfaces or solids, and knowing is that just a very thin eggshell surface, or did I make a solid piece when I did this 3D object? That will show up as different styles in your 2D wireframe. That's an important thing to know. And then realistic versus, yeah, so play around and you just click on what the text in here, and then you can click on some different visual styles to play around with it. The custom views. Okay, so this is if you want to look straight at the top of it, at the right-hand side, at the front of it. If you want to kind of have some isometric view, you can have parallel, where all of the lines are parallel to one another, or perspective, which is where you have a vanishing line or vanishing point, something that you use for architects, like houses or big landscapes. You'll use a perspective versus parallel. You can get these same views by clicking on the sides of your view cube, or like the corner of your view cube. Another way to rotate around is you can click on your scroll key and hold it down on the shift button of your keyboard. So if you're clicking both of these, you can kind of move your mouse around and it will rotate your object. So lots of different ways to do exactly the same thing. They all work. Okay, this little plus sign here And the viewports, these are kind of nice. So what we changed between, so this is 3 with one large one on the left and then 2 different viewports on the right. And so what we went through, we changed from 1 large viewing area to now we have 3 viewing area, and you can have just a couple different views going on, and that can be helpful. If you want it to go away, then you can just come back to the single viewport. Okay, what else? Let's see, we've got the nav bar over here. Let's just look at this thing. So if you click on this little tool, you'll get something that lets you orbit and pan right there next to your cursor. Here's pan, so it turns your cursor into a little hand, and you can left click and just move things left, right, up, down. If you have your object is really small or really big, you accidentally scrolled out, the zoom button will automatically get things to just fill up your screen. This is a nicer orbit, so another way to rotate around views rather than the view cube. Okay, one thing to talk about before we get into it, if you find yourself squinting at the screen, like maybe the command line, it's too small, you can't see the buttons, so this is really important. If you right click, it doesn't matter where, just right click anywhere on the screen, you'll get a little menu that pops up with options, and this will allow you to change the font size of your command line. So under this little display tab, fonts, you can pop it up from a font size of 10 to 14, which is much better than 10. You can change the size of your crosshairs. You can change your color scheme from dark to light. Over here in drafting, so there's all these little markers if you're at the corner or the midpoint, and you can change the size of those. So yeah, take some time to customize your work area, and then when you get it set to something you like, again, save it as a template so you don't have to go through all these little customizations over and over again every time you open up a new file. But this is, yeah, make sure that you have buttons enlarged and font, a nice large font size so you're not squinting at the computer. That's important. The ribbon. So this is where we'll start, and you kind of work your way from left to right, drawing, modify tools, annotate, layers. This is one of the big advantage of AutoCAD over some of the other software like SolidWorks and Inventor, is just how you can organize pieces of your drawing, and we can play around. I don't want you setting lines over here. We'll actually set all of this in layers. It's much better. And so we've got tools up here. If you click on line or circle or something up here, text is going to appear down in your command line. Or you can just type in your command line to get something started. So 2 different ways to start telling it what to do. It's faster to type it than to find the right button up here. And so those who are experienced, who have been doing this for years and years, there's even shortcuts. Like you don't type in the entire word C-I-R-C-L-E, you just C-I-R and you'll get circle real quick. So it's faster, but while you're learning, click on a button and then read. It'll automatically fill in what that same thing would have been if you typed it in. Okay, so you click on a button, you come over here, and you only get one line at a time, but if you want to see all the past commands that you've used, you can hit this arrow, and it will give you a whole series of what you've typed in there. Also, with the undo and redo buttons, you can undo one thing, or you can click on this and pull it down and undo a whole string of commands if you want to. So that's kind of convenient. Explore these arrows underneath all of the tools. Okay, so here's an example. So let's say I want to draw a circle. Well, it needs a lot of pieces of information here. So you start by saying, we're going to make a circle, not a rectangle or a line. You type it in, and then it asks you for something. So this is what's going to, the text that shows up in the command line. So it says, what is the center point for your circle? And if I know the center point, then I'll type that XY coordinate in. The other way that I can define a circle is maybe I want it to go through 3 points or 2 points, or I want to give it a radius. So in the square brackets, it's going to give you a few other ways to define your shape. And you can either just type in what the default is, or you can click on something in these square brackets to walk through a different way of defining it. Okay, so now we have the center point, and it's going to keep asking us questions. Okay, what is the radius of your circle? And if I want to tell it what the diameter is instead of the radius, then I can click on diameter, or I could say D for diameter. But one way or the other, I need to tell it how large. So typing in 8 here, that's going to tell how large the radius is. Okay, if I want to do one command after the other, you can actually just hit enter. So yeah, you can just type CIR instead of circle as a shortcut. Enter the information it needs, and then if you're doing the same command over and over again, line, 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 or circle, 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 if you hit enter, it'll pull up the previous command that it had in there. So then you go through this again, and everything in AutoCAD, it's a graph. This is not a picture, it's a graph. You can zoom in infinitely, and it will never get pixelated because it's not like a JPEG image. It actually is data, it's a graph, and part of this is learning how to think of things in terms of Cartesian XYZ coordinates. Okay, so you're entering in, and you'll see something now. It says, oh, we used 8 before. And it gives you something in these kind of triangular brackets. So if you want to create the same circle again, I can hit enter, and it will do whatever is in these kind of triangular brackets. So enter to do the default of what it suggests, or you can change what information you're feeding it in the square brackets, or you can actually type in just a number as this comes up. Okay, so you hit a command, you type in line, it says, okay, where do you want my line to start? So let's start at this XY coordinate. And for all of these, if you ever get stuck that you type something in and hit escape, escape will get you out of any loops that it gets stuck in, and escape is going to be the most used key in AutoCAD. You end up hitting escape over and over and over again as you walk through this. So yeah, escape, escape. That was a nice key when that was added to the keyboard. Okay, Control Z or click on the arrows to undo one or more options. Switch between different ribbon styles if you want to give yourself more room to draw. There's bunches of options in the ribbon too. So if you just click on all these little down arrows, it'll give you different ways to define objects. And if you hover your cursor over something, if you hover it for a little bit, it comes up with a quick description. Leave it there for a little bit longer, so you have to be patient. Just put your cursor somewhere and just let it sit there for a while. It will pop up with instructions on how to use that tool. So tangent, tangent, tangent. This will draw a circle that is tangent to 3 lines. And so it'll show you, if you click number 1, this is the first place you click, number 2, this is the second place you click, and then 3. It will create a circle that is touching those 3 lines, tangent, tangent, tangent. So yeah, explore all these drawing tools by just hovering your cursor over it, and then patience, wait for it to pop up with the instructions on how to use it. Customizing your tools. So any blank area and pretty much anything. If you right click on anything, you'll get extra options. So you can get extra buttons, extra panels, and if you're missing buttons, just right click And whatever you have selected here, that's the tools that are going to be showing up in your ribbon. And that's pretty universal. You can do that for Word and PowerPoint. All of the Office software has very similar things that you can customize what is showing up in that top ribbon of your page. Okay, let's say I'm going back and forth between my drawing tools and maybe my annotate. And I find myself going back and forth, and I just want those in the same place. You can actually click on that tool and drag it into your drawing area, and then it will stay in your drawing area as you go to another tab with a whole nother set of tools. So that's another thing you can do. And if you ever want to drag it back, you just go to whatever tab you want it in, click on it, left click, and drag it back into wherever you want it. So that's another way that you can customize your drawing area. So that's very nice. Snap and alignment tools. This is extremely, extremely important. Let's go ahead and zoom in on this toolbar at the bottom of the screen. So what we have here is a bunch of tools. So model versus paper space. First, make sure that you are in model space if you're drawing. For paper space, we'll do all of that in the layout tabs, not the model tab. So keep everything in model space and draw to scale. For grids, so you can either have a black background or something with grid paper on it, depending on those lines showing up or not, is just this first little grid being dark blue or not. So if it's blue, it's going to show up. If it's gray, it's off. If you want to actually snap to grids, so that's this next little tool. And again, if it's blue, that means your lines are going to snap to your grids. And you can actually right click on this and set how large these grids are. So if you want straight lines, snap to grid. If you don't want your lines snapping to grid, then it needs to be turned to gray. As well as snapping to grids, you can also snap to angles. So if you want everything to follow 30 and 60 degree angles, or maybe 45, 90, 15, 10, 20, 30, there's all different types of settings to snap to your angle. Blue, it's snapping to it. Gray, it's not. For objects, so you've drawn something and you want the new line to maybe be at a midpoint of another object or at the end of another line, or maybe you want to find the center of your circle. There's all these different shapes that your cursor will change to a different shape when it is hovering over these types of features. So if you want these snaps to be on, and again, blue is on, you click the little arrow, you can select which of these you want your cursor and your lines to snap to, and then watch your cursor change shape as it's trying to snap and connect to different objects on there. So those are some of the snap settings. There's a few extra tools that you can show in here. Click on the three lines on the lower right-hand side, these three little lines here. And one of the important things, coordinates. So when you start up, and you have to start up a command, but when you type in something like line or circle, and then hover your cursor, it will actually show you the XYZ coordinates of where your cursor is. So this is very helpful to have those coordinates show up on here. There's also your dynamic input that is not on here by default that you can show up. And there's two different ways to type in commands, using the command line down here or the dynamic input, that this little button will appear when you click it up here. dynamic input, it puts a little command line right by your cursor. And then when you're typing in coordinates, it's with reference to the previous point that you were at. So I can say go forward 10, and that is with respect to the last dot or the last line you drew. Versus if you're using the command line, every XY coordinate, it's going to be with respect to where your user coordinate system is. So two different ways. So this one is with respect to the last point, not the coordinate system, versus drawing something with respect to the user coordinate system. So that's another important thing. So to turn this on or off, you can type in dyne mode, and on is 3 and off is -3. Here it shows in the command mode. Dynamic mode is on or off, or you can click it on or off if you put this little tool into the bottom of your screen. It shows up like this, and you'll see that little command line pop up next to your cursor. Just in review, you have your drawing tab, so you can have multiple drawings open at the same time. All of your drawing tools up here in the ribbon. Here's your view cube for orientation, your navigation bar, command line, model and layout spaces, your snap and alignment tools. Okay, I'd strongly suggest everybody take the time to explore all of these tools. Make sure you can rotate, zoom, turn snaps on and off, that you understand what all of those different snap settings do. We'll have a scribble page that you can, the sole purpose of the scribble page is to explore all of the different drawing tools and make sure you can use all of the buttons on this. So if you just start from left to right, click them on and off, see what they do, that would be a great start for everybody.